This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome, everybody, to the June 2nd edition of Wireless Risks and Safer Technology Solutions. And I'm so honored to have with us here this month two wonderful gentlemen from Idaho. Hank Allen was our host earlier in the month, and today David DeHaas will be partnering with me on this Zoom as well. Hank, you want to give us a quick update? I understand there might have been some motion on the lawsuit because Verizon put a cell tower up just 600 meters off your property.
Yes.
You want to give us a quick update on that one?
Well, I'm still recovering. It was kind of a gut punch, but our local Idaho judge, district judge, he tossed out our case and dismissed it. And I think it's going to be appealed. It probably will be appealed to the Ninth Circuit, but it was definitely it was a blow, and still recovering it. It feels like they're taking away any kind of resources we have to protect our families.
Mhm.
And as all of this thing is going away, and I know like the FCC has a what do you call it, their April filing where they're going to bring broadband back into telecommunication services, and you know, something's got to be done, and our options are getting a lot smaller. What we have to do for this to protect our families. So, yeah, I know the McCullough Law Firm and Children's Health Defense, they're still positive. They've been expecting that this would go probably to the Supreme Court to get relief. And I'm there. Well, I'm going to fight, to the end. I have no choice, right? So we're going to fight. But I will tell you, it definitely sucks.
Yeah, my heart broke for you guys when I heard that this week. I'm so very sorry, but
Mm-hmm.
that's the way these things go. And the only way they get resolved is by staying in there as hard as it is and fighting literally for your life and the life of your three daughters and your wife and the animals on your farm and the poor bees on the other side of your house that haven't been fried already.
Yeah, and it's fighting for my family and the things you just mentioned, but it's also it's fighting for everyone, anyone who's watching this, anybody who suffers from EMF sensitivity, or that doesn't even know they're being harmed by this stuff, as there's hundreds of different things that happen to our bodies from the EMF, and people aren't aware of it. They think they're tired for some reason, as you explained with all of your crusades. So I see this goes much further than just my personal circumstances.
Well, thank you for
And
that, Hank.
I know God's in charge, and there's a plan to all this, and sometimes waiting for that plan to be revealed, it's hard.
I know.
Yeah, but we'll
Hank, didn't you say the judge was saying that because it's an American Disabilities Act case that it had to be in a public building, as it was his words?
Yeah, brick and mortar. Basically, for the Title III of the ADA to, I guess, be relevant, they actually want a physical brick and mortar. And wireless radiation isn't physical, which we all disagree with. I mean, it is very physical. It's obviously threw me into AFib, over almost 20 times, and has destroyed my life here on our farm. So it's obviously a physical thing.
Mhm.
You just can't see it.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, it's been a difficult week.
Well, Hank, please know our thoughts and prayers are with you and your family and your attorneys and everybody else who's been hoping that that case would go in a different direction. But like you said, they're not resting on their laurels. I know your attorneys are talking about this right now.
Yep.
And we pray for you that it does go to the next step. And as things converge, maybe we'll get different judges, maybe we'll get different things that happen in society that make it easier for these authorities to put the responsible actions into place. So folks, I've just dropped into the chat a half-hour interview that Hank and I did at our WCCA TV station.
Hank, Cece?
Yeah.
The patents are for a bioweapon, and they pay a secrecy fee to the patent office to hide them for 50 to 100 years, depending upon. That's how we found the Pfizer documents, because they forgot to renew the secrecy fee when they fixed a typo in their patent of a cartoon animation. So these cell towers violate public health and safety laws, period.
Mm-hmm.
The applications in Sebastopol were denied as being incomplete because they did not conform to public health and safety laws. You can't kill people with treason and hide the patent.
Well,
So
thank you for that. If
Sure.
Hank, if you want to drop your email into the chat, perhaps she can connect with you and you guys can discuss that with your legal.
Yeah, that would be
I'm
great.
on the landline.
Okay, can you send me an email and I'll connect you with Hank?
Sure, later.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll
Good
be
enough.
online later.
Okay, thanks. Well, we did something a
mute
little bit
myself.
unusual today in opening up this conversation at the front of the meeting. Usually we save our chat for the end of the meeting, but while Hank is with us, I don't know if he'll be able to stay for the full 2 hours. So I just wanted to say thank you for your fight. Sorry for everything you guys are going through. And I pray for your resiliency and ultimately your triumph in all of this.
Thank you.
Cece, could I just make one statement? This is Kathy in Eugene.
Yeah.
A friend of mine, he went to 150 houses and did inspections for EMF with about $300 or $400 worth of shielding material. He helped a man, was in between two towers, and he just had a baby, and he had another little girl with his wife, and they cut back the radiation by 90%.
Thank you
Yeah,
for that.
that's great.
Kathy.
That's awesome.
Okay. All right, everybody. Hank, I'm going to take you out of the spotlight so you can go do whatever you want to do or stay with us, whatever makes you happy today. That's all we want for you. And I'd like to introduce you to David DeHaas of Idahoans for Safe Technology, as well as Hank was. David, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and just in a nutshell what you guys have been working on in Idaho?
Yeah, so Hank and I were the founders of Idahoans for Safe Technology. We got a call back in May of 2020, and I was basically started drinking from the fire hose, learning about electromagnetic radiation, the cell towers, what we could and couldn't do, and I'm involved politically, and that's been a big help in our state. So we started educating our legislators and our local commissioners and council people. Some were open to hearing about us, and some, like the city of Boise, just didn't want to hear it. They've been paid and bought for by Verizon, and so we've lost the battle there in Boise, but we've got many cities around us. So initially, it was a pretty big group, but as all volunteer organizations go, they kind of wane. But we've done a lot. We've got in Idaho itself, Dalton Gardens, thanks to the great work of Sue and Ann up in Northern Idaho. They've got a great ordinance passed that Andrew Campanelli and Paul McGavin oversaw, and our local attorney, Norm Semenko. So anybody out there looking to fight these battles, you've got to get involved in politics. You've got to get to know the local people on the ground. You've got to pony up to them, bring your Sound and Safe Pro meter with you, show them what happens with this stuff. And it's been quite a 4 years. It seems like 24 years sometimes, as you're probably well aware of, Cece.
Yes, I can't believe I've been in it for 10 years.
And I'm so grateful to you, because one of the first people I ever interviewed about this was you. I don't know if you remember it or not, but back in 2020, I interviewed a couple of people, and thankfully to all your great work, and I watched all your videos, and that helped me get up to speed, quite frankly. And your slides, I've used those slides several times, and so guys, it's all about information, and it's staying in the game and keep just prodding and poking at your local. I'm going out with my local county commissioner again tonight and saying, hey, it's been 4 years. We got to get this written. So I'll meet with them again tonight. Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. So and Hank has some wonderful resources out on their website. On my last slide today, we'll have the links to that and to his email. So again, we're not here just because we're here and this is what we do. We're here for you. We're here.
Yeah. Thanks to Hank. Yeah, thanks to Hank. That website has got a lot of great information, including his whole story. That I definitely idahoansforsafetechnology.org. I mean, you've got your websites that got plenty of information, but there's a lot of good information there as well. So
Okay, well, thank you so much, Hank, or David. I'm going to drop into the chat right now the interview that you and I did at the cable station as well. So folks can, save those on your computer. For those who are not all that familiar with Zoom, if you go into the chat and you go down to the very bottom, there's some little icons and stuff. One of them is an ellipse, the ... And at the end of our program, if you click on that ellipse, it will allow you to save the chat right to your own computer. And then you can peruse the links and the other information that may drop in there throughout the program. So, okay, well, with that, David is now going to be the wizard behind the curtain there. And we'll be admitting people if they join us from here on out. And then he'll also keep an eye on the chat. And after my presentation, we will go ahead and open it up to questions and answers. He'll let us know if there are any questions. And we look forward to sharing the next hour and 45 minutes with you. We know that what we present today is going to be like drinking water out of a fire hose for people who are relatively new to this conversation, but hang in there. When I was raising my kids and something had them upset, I'd say, sweetie, go scream into the pillow on the couch. Just get it out of your body. Go scream into the couch because it's a lot, but then come back to the table. And one by one, we can sort through what needs to happen to make you safe in your spaces or safer. And then what we can do at the municipal level and what we can do at the state and other federal levels, because there's a lot of really good work going on in all of these areas. So I'm going to go ahead and start my screen share. Let's see, where's my friend David? All right. David, can you give me a shout out if you can see my screen now?
Yep, I can see it. Yep.
Okay, perfect. All right, so these are the slides that we're going to be sending out after today's program. Once we have the video rendered, it'll probably come out tomorrow. And that MTPW after my name just means that I had the privilege of earning a master's in technical and professional writing from Northeastern University here in Boston. And I also earned a bachelor's degree in communication. And I thought I was going off to become a broadcast journalist. But my career took me more into tech writing. And now here I am, because mainstream media won't cover this issue, trying to broadcast out the facts. So I've come full circle. I'm very grateful to have this skill set. And so anything that I've learned along my journey, I'm more than happy to share with everybody else. And I'll share a minute or two on my story. So I didn't know anything about wireless. In fact, I used to run our local education foundation when my daughters were in school. And I ran 8 campaigns to get wireless in. The wireless infrastructure, the iPads, the Chromebooks, the smart boards, the minis, the Apple TV. I went gangbusters and got funding for all of that. And then one night at book group, my girlfriend, who's an electrical engineer, tipped me off that there could be biological effects. So that's where my journey began. And I was like, it was book group. So I just made a mental note of it. But not long after that, I had seen that the American Academy of Environmental Medicine, these are the doctors who get the conundrum cases that regularly trained doctors know nothing about, these environmental exposures. So they put out a position statement to school superintendents in 2012, warning them, please do not let wireless into the schools. Stay with your hardwired connections. So I was like, well, that's interesting. And then I thought, I wonder if there's any science to this. So I, being a tech writer, just wanted to see the science. And I was astounded to find literally thousands of peer-reviewed studies all over the world showing extensive biological harm. And we'll walk you through the science in a few minutes. So I raised my hand in the schools and I said, I think we got a problem here. And I got back crickets. But I persisted and I started sharing the science. And ultimately, it was not an easy journey at all. But we became the first in the United States to even have a little sign like this hanging in our classrooms with best practices for mobile devices. Turn off the devices when we're not using them. Turn the Wi-Fi on only when we need it. Don't just let those routers and access points pulsate radiation all the time. And always put a mobile device on a solid surface, not your body. So, you know, and when I was a little girl, my mom, if I was standing too close to the TV, she'd, Cece, stand back from that TV. Well, that TV back in the day had an electric and magnetic field that was stronger than our body's own electric and magnetic field. So all these different kinds of man-made energies have an impact, and we need to know the risks so that we can make informed choices on how we choose to connect with our technological world. So we were the first nation, unbeknownst to me, to actually get a school committee to do something, at least with precautionary steps. When I realized that it was just a sign on the wall and they weren't doing it yet, they were waiting for higher authorities to tell them what to do, I went and met with my Senator, Karen Spilka, who today is our Senate President in Massachusetts. And Karen and I had served on our local education foundation together, and we liked each other immensely. So I went to her and I showed her the science, and I showed her Ashland's little sign, and I measured her cell phone and her district director's laptop, and both devices went right off the charts. And we're going to give you a demonstration with a device in a minute. But Senator Spilka's looking at me, you know, like deer in the headlights, going, really? And I said, yes. And nobody knows. This is like tobacco. It's like alcohol or pornography or gambling or drugs. Adults will make their choices, but we are morally obligated to look out for our children. So Senator Spilka put me with an attorney in her office, and together we crafted a very simple bill back in 2014 to create a commission to bring the right minds together at the state level and look at this issue and decide what they need to do. So we at one point had 20 bills filed in Massachusetts, and I was congratulated. Wow, a bill never makes it out of committee the first time it's introduced. And I didn't know what any of that meant. I didn't have a political bone in my body, but it was apparently a good thing that we at least got it out of the Joint Committee on Public Health. But then it went to another committee, and then it timed out before anything meaningful could happen. And that's what's happened for 10 years with our bills in Massachusetts.
Wow.
And then there's New Hampshire, and Deb Hodgson, who has just been an incredible champion for technology safety. She spoke with us this week in our World EHS Symposium. And Deb got very sick from all the wireless inside her home. And we can hear more of her story later, but she ultimately brought me up to do a Generation Zapped screening. It's an award-winning film, and we did it at her library. And she went and talked to her legislators, and this, you know, diamond in the rough, Representative Patrick Abrami, who's now running for Senate, he was an engineer, or is an engineer, and he had only been taught you have to have heat from a device to cause any harm. That's called the thermal effect, and that's what all of our government regulations are set up to today, is how much heat does it take from a device to raise the temperature of your skin in 6 or 30 minutes. That's all they did, decades and decades and decades ago. They never accounted for what's happening below the heat level. And now we have thousands of studies showing at the non-thermal, non-ionizing, low level of electromagnetic radiation, we're doing an awful lot of harm. So when Rep. Abrami started reading the science, he had this major wow moment, like, wow, what are we doing here? And Deb introduced me to him. They got in his car from New Hampshire. They drove down to my home. We sat at my kitchen table for the afternoon and helped him to connect the dots. And we'll show you in a few minutes what happened in New Hampshire. So somebody in Europe found my work with the schools and the legislature, and Dr. Deborah Davis of the Environmental Health Trust, she was she's now the president emerita and the founder. She knew about my work, and when somebody in Europe contacted her to say, hey, can we reference the Environmental Health Trust website in this little course that we're building? Because we realize you can't fix this until people know about it. And so you have to formalize some kind of education. And she said, absolutely, go ahead, reference our website, no problem. And you might want to talk to this woman, Cece Doucette, who's making inroads with her schools and legislature. So I volunteered my time with these folks in Europe, and joining our team was Dr. Mikko Ahonen from Finland, and he's one of the leading scientists on this too. So we all had this miraculous 6 months in our schedules where we had some flexibility, and we hit it hard. And we created originally wireless education. We've literally got a 30-minute course online that can be used to train an entire workforce, an entire school. It can be used to train your entire municipality or your family or your best friend or your lover. We have online formal training available, and we're just about to rebrand and call ourselves Safer Tech Education. So we'll be announcing that shortly. But right now you can still get at that course and take it. We are a nonprofit with overhead, so we do have to charge a minimal fee. It's like about the cost of a movie ticket. And then when Dr. Deborah Davis, who's from the Environmental Health Trust, and by the way, she's a Nobel co-laureate on climate change. She was part of that team on climate change. So she's one of the world's and our country's leading scientists. She came to the Massachusetts State House with a, Lucia, can you please mute yourself? Thank you. She came to the State House with a panel of experts. She brought with her Dr. Sharma from India, who serves in their government. He's done some of the reproduction studies that showed this radiation is damaging our reproductive systems. And he also is the advisor in the Indian government. That's Indian, not US Indian. And he has worked with them. Their public radiation exposure limits are were way up here, right where ours still are in North America, as are some other countries. India brought theirs down 90%, at least on paper, and they're in the throes of figuring out how to make meaningful change. But that showed with political will, we can make important inroads. Dr. Davis also brought with her Frank Clegg, who's the retired president of Microsoft Canada. And I'm sitting at our State House going, whoa, there's a captain of industry here. And sure enough, Dr. Magda Havas and other scientists in Canada had gone to visit with Frank Clegg in his home, and they brought their meters and they measured. And he had been in the industry for 30 years and had no idea what wireless truly meant. So Frank, being a man of integrity, reached out and did his research and met with a dozen of the world leading scientists. And he came back and concluded, in the US, our Federal Communications Commission's public radiation exposure limit guidelines are not safe, nor are Canada's Safety Code 6. So it was really empowering to hear that from an industry insider. And so being in this rabbit hole for my first 2 years, I didn't have anybody I could talk to. I was just self-taught, digging as deep as I could to try and undo the unwitting harm that I had done in my children's schools. So it was so gratifying to go to this forum at the State House, and it was standing room only, wall to wall, with people who actually knew about this issue. It was amazing. And so we started connecting, and ultimately we formed Massachusetts for Safe Technology. And I include this link because we've got a lot of easily accessible information for you out there. Feel free to pound around on my website. And anybody who does contact us through that website, it'll come right to me. So I'll reach right back out and see what I can do to help you. Then somebody down at the National Institutes of Health found my work and asked me to come down and co-chair the technology panel for the Health in Buildings Roundtable Conference. So this was a national conference of hospitals, city planners, all the green organizations like LEEDS and others. We had scientists, we had doctors, we had government agencies, just this incredible group of people. And this was the first time most of them were hearing anything about biological risk from wireless technology. And I was so honored that when I put the invitation out there, Theodora Scarrato from the Environmental Health Trust, she's the executive director, she joined us and talked about what other countries around the world are already doing. You know, France, Belgium, Italy, Israel have all taken meaningful action to start protecting, especially the children. And we're way behind the 8 ball here because industry lives here. We had Frank Clegg from Microsoft Canada. He flew in on his own time and dime, bless him. We had Dr. Martin Paul, who's one of the world's leading researchers on this, and he told us what the mechanisms of harm are, because industry for years has spun it like, oh, there's no mechanism of harm identified in the scientific literature, so let's just keep doing what we're doing. Well, we're going to teach you those mechanisms of harm today. And then we also had on our panel this gentleman named Peter Sullivan. And I had found Peter through a lecture that he gave online on autism. And Peter started out in the military as a fighter pilot, kind of like Top Gun. So he's up there way up high with the Earth's really high electromagnetic fields inside of a fighter plane with radar all over it and all the wireless instrumentation inside the cockpit that allows him to communicate back to the base station. So Peter was up there in very high natural and man-made electromagnetic fields. And so Peter's health eventually started to crash. So once he finished his service, he was an engineer. So he went to work in Silicon Valley, like his buddies invented the cell phone. So he's at the top of his game there. And then Peter starts getting really sick, like dropping crazy weight. His teeth are starting to get brittle and break. And then when each of his sons came up through the preschool years, they were both diagnosed on the autism spectrum. And when I listened to Peter's lecture, he said he and his wife did what a lot of families will do. They'll go to a clean organic diet, so you're no longer eating chemicals in the conventionally grown foods. He went so far as to do the heavy metal detox to pull some of these toxins out of your sensitive organs. And he says today, those are all important. But today, your first line of defense should be a digital detox for at least 12 hours at night. And when Peter implemented that, they all began to heal. And he said today, his sons, who are grown men, both went to college, both are, you know, good contributing members of society. Neither one of his sons are on the autism spectrum anymore. And I went, whoa, I didn't even know that was an option. But apparently there's something called de novo mutations, which means it didn't come from mom's bloodline. It didn't come from dad's bloodline. It came from somewhere in the environment. And when you clean up the environment and you give your body that space to heal, what some would call miracles, it's really just getting our bodies back to homeostasis. And we don't want to overpromise. There are many, many factors, as anybody knows, with any chronic illness. But when you remove these environmental exposures, we really do see such incredible recovery and improvement for many people. So, Debbie, can you please mute? So the reason I like to include this link to our NIH talks is that we were held to 10 minutes or less in each one of our talks. So know your audience. If you want to start talking to other people about wireless, sending them something from the National Institutes of Health is a pretty powerful statement. And all of our talks are under 10 minutes. So it's really a good quick crash course in wireless risks and solutions. So then, because we've been doing this work in the legislatures, I was asked to help with the first 2 medical conferences that we've had in our country. The first one was in 2019, with Dr. Lynn Patrick leading that one. The second one, Elizabeth Kelly, spearheaded that, and it was the executive director. And again, we bring world-renowned top researchers, top doctors, building biologists, activists, and others. And there were 24.5 continuing medical education credits available for that up and through July 2023. Once the accreditation period ended, we realized that everything in that conference is still totally applicable today, and we are desperate to get this training out to your healthcare teams, your community, your local police, your local fire, your nurses at school, the doctors who service your schools. Everybody needs to get trained on this. And the beauty of it is Libby Kelly put this entire conference online at no charge, literally a 4-day medical conference, all the lectures, all the questions and answers, all the discussion panels, and all the additional supplemental materials that went with that conference. There's a collection of about 60 videos. Maybe one is 17 minutes, maybe one's a half an hour, maybe one's an hour. So you can slot them into a calendar and take this incredible training at your own time. So please use the resources that we have here. So I just want to do a little vocabulary check-in. What we're talking about today can be categorized in broad terms as man-made radiation. When we talk about wireless radiation, in large part, we're talking about radio frequency or microwave radiation. There's also man-made energies that come off of the wiring in our walls in our homes. In commercial builds, that wiring has to be encased in a sheath of foil inside the plastic encasement. In residential, they don't have to put that foil liner in there. And what that does is it allows the electric and magnetic fields to invisibly penetrate into our living spaces about 6 or 8 feet off the wall. So for people who become sensitized to these man-made energies, sometimes they need to be careful with the wiring, the electric fields, the magnetic fields coming off of appliances and lighting. But most of what we're going to talk about today are the radio frequency microwave signals that are used to pulse our signals and data back and forth when we're using wireless tech. So that's a bit of our alphabet soup. So EMF means electromagnetic fields of man-made radiation. So that's how I got involved, you guys. So what made my schools become the first in the nation to even have our little sign hanging in our classrooms? I think it was when they read the legal fine print. So for everybody with us today who has an iPhone, I invite you to take that out right now and go into your settings. And please know that our friends at the Environmental Health Trust have put up a webpage called See the Fine Print, where you can go through a lot of the notifications that have been buried in our devices forever, where they warned us, but nobody knows it's there. So feel free to see that link for See the Fine Print. But once you're in settings, scroll down just a little and hit General. From General, go all the way down to the bottom and hit Legal and Regulatory. On the next screen, about 4 down, you'll see RF exposure. So for anybody who doesn't have an iPhone, maybe you've got an Android or a Google, if you look up RF exposure with your make and model, you will find a similar disclaimer. And what these disclaimers are telling us is, 1, this device was tested at a distance from the body. So if you're holding up onto your body in your shirt pocket, your suit pocket, your bra, your waistband, your back pocket, you are exceeding the government limits for microwave radiation that they politely call energy, because it is a man-made energy. And worse, those government guidelines were never biologically safety tested for consumer protection. So when you go a little bit further down, they warn us. They say to reduce your exposure, basically, once you know, don't touch a radiating device. It's common sense once you know. So they suggest that you use a headset, right? And I'm gonna pause my screen share for just a moment and give you assurances that everything we've broken, we know how to fix today. So for those headsets, when you have like an iPhone, and they might give you a wired headset that comes with it, one of the properties about microwave radiation is it amplifies around metal. So if you have your radiating device, you plug in a metal wire to it and then plug it into your head on the other end, the microwaves are going, woohoo, party time. We're going right on up to your brain, which doesn't make a lot of sense once you know the risks. And once you sit through the science with us, you'll have a pretty good handle on that. So the solution for that is, one, please don't ever put those earbuds back in your head. The wireless earbuds, the iPod buds, man, that's a microwave transmitter on both sides of your brain, sending radiation back and forth to some device you probably tucked on your body or nearby. So
Cece, it was just an article in the Epic Times. I did a radio show on this, on the tinnitus being caused by the wireless earpods, and it's on Apple's site. Within not too many days of someone posting about that, there was 3,200 people. This is back 4 years ago, that typed in "me too." So
yeah.
they went on further about what, the cause of, sealing off your ears is not good, plus just the double radiation.
Yeah, and now we're getting reports too that the ear can't breathe if you've got those buds in there. And now
Exactly.
we're seeing infections, and then there's hearing loss because people are using the it's right on your brain, and you're cranking the volume. So
Now you
bad,
have 3
bad.
cell phones.
So here's what you do if you really need to use a headset. First, download anything that you're just doing for entertainment. Download that to your device, and then turn off all the antennas. Because what they don't tell us is this one device has many different antennas for every service they've given you. So we never thought of them really as services, but you've got cellular and data and Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and locator and hotspot. And for anybody who got talked into buying a 5G phone, there's another array of antennas in there. And every single one of those antennas is always pulsing microwave radiation going, here I am, where are you? Here I am, where are you? I want to make a handshake, I want to connect. We don't need that. Today, we're going to teach you to get to the minimum, to get to as low as reasonably achievable. That's what our Centers for Disease Control calls the ALARA principle, as low as reasonably achievable. So back to the headset. Yeah, it's not as cool and sleek as sticking earbuds on your brain, but it will do some good for you. So you still have a plug that goes into your device, but you've got a nice long cord so you can create some distance, right? So the Centers for Disease Control with ionizing radiation, which breaks the atom, non-ionizing radiation doesn't necessarily break the atom, but it's causing a whole host of harm at the non-thermal level. So CDC says 3 things. 1, reduce the amount of time that you're spending radiating yourself. 2, create as much distance from something that's radiating. And 3, if you can't get away from it, you darn well better shield yourself, or you're going to be in the line of fire. So this creates some distance. You'd set the device as far away from you as you can. It's got a metal wire that goes up to about here, and then it's got a mute and an audio control here. And then these are little ferrite beads that break the radiation, but give you good acoustics in this hollow or air tube here. Notice on mine, they're just rubber tips because you don't want to bring additional metal up to your brain if you're in a Wi-Fi environment, right? So one time I saw a set of these that had magnets here, and I thought that's cool. You could just hang it around your neck. But then I went, oh, but then you're putting metal up to a radiating. So stay away from metal around your brain. Hollow tube or air tube headset, easy to find online. Only costs you about $20 or $30. The first year I learned about this, guess what my kids got in their Christmas stockings? So we try to practice what we preach as best as we can and still try and live a good life in this techno world we find ourselves in. So the next thing I want to do while my camera is back on is I had a really hard time getting my head around this invisible exposure. How do we even know we're being exposed? And the only way to know is to measure it. So this is the measurement device that was recommended at the EMF Medical Conference. Doctors are taking this into their practice. There's one here on the North Shore in Massachusetts who bought it. She rents it to her patients for $10 and says, you've got 2 hours. Go home, do your scavenger hunt, write down every exposure that you can find, and then come back and I'm going to teach you what to do. So In the scientific literature, when we turn this on, see how it's all lit up? Now it drops down. This flashing green is as good as you can get. In the scientific literature on the middle number, that's the maximum spike of this microwave radiation. What's the max? The science wants us to be at 10 or less. The unit of measurement is something called microwatts per square meter. So basically, 3 feet of air, how much radiation is there? Knowing what I know, and once I stopped circling my tail and said, hey, you're the mom, it's your job, get this fixed, I one by one replaced all the radiating stuff or just turned off the antennas that we weren't even using. And now in my home, I'm down to two microwatts per square meter. So I keep my cell phone in airplane mode as a rule. By now, everybody in my world knows to get me on my landline, right? A good old fashioned plug-in landline. I chose one that's battery operated, so if power goes down, I may still get a signal. And I forward cell phone calls to my landline when I'm not on the go. And then when I am on the go, I only turn on the one antenna I need. Maybe I need to navigate something. So I will go into my, whatever nav program I've got going on in there, get the directions. As soon as I get the directions, I can then go fully into airplane mode. And there's a satellite triangulation system that will still get me to where I need to go without using microwave radiation in the car. So lots of little tips and tricks. So I'm at a 2. I'm going to take my phone out of airplane mode and go after. And see now my meter is screaming at the flashing red. And I'm not even doing anything. These are just that set of antennas coming on live. And wow. Okay, that's enough of that. I'm going to go right back into airplane mode. And you'll see after a few seconds, the radiation dissipates and it drops back down, but it holds on to that maximum number. We were at 2 microwatts. Just turning on my phone with those multiple antennas, we went to 2,240,000 microwatts per square meter, and I wasn't even doing anything. This is how toxic our world has become and why it's so critically important to protect all of us, but most importantly, our children, our fetuses, the elderly, and anybody with an existing health condition, because you're already down a quart and our body doesn't have that kind of energy to keep up with all the repair that has to happen. So we really encourage people to get a meter if you can, and I'm going to go back into my screen sharing and give you some words of encouragement on that too. Okay, David, can you see my screen again?
I can see it. And when you get a chance, I found another device. I interviewed a guy recently that creates a toric field. It's called a Q shield. And they're not inexpensive, but it puts in my building, it creates a whole toric field throughout the building. So it helps mitigate all of the stray frequencies that are coming at us. And I've got one here on my desk. It's a rather small one.
Yeah.
But anyway, there's about 25 clinical trials on it. Fascinating little piece as well.
Good. Yeah, we've broken this. We can fix it. When it comes to product use, we advise going in wisely. Because we are biologically different, every single one of us, what might be beneficial for somebody can harm another person. So what we encourage is to do muscle testing to get the body's biofeedback on whether something is going to strengthen your biosphere or might short you out before you invest yourself in any kind of a product. So once we got this little sign happening at my schools, I thought, well, part of the problem is it's invisible. So we had a grant program here in my town. And I thought, let me submit a grant application and get a meter for the library and one for the schools. Then we can just get our data, do our gap analysis, and figure out how to fix this, right? Well, this was so foreign to everybody I talked to, except the gentleman who at the time was our town manager, he too had been a fighter pilot. And he told me that our government still checks in with all the retired pilots to see if they're getting cancers or other fallouts, and they are. He was the only person in my town, though, that I wasn't the first person to bring this topic up to. So it was not easy. I submitted my application. They denied it. They're like, we don't really know about this. Come back late. I came back the next time. I submitted my application with all the science, and they said, well, gee, we're the select board. We think it's probably more of a Board of Health issue. Well, I knew my Board of Health didn't know about this already because I'd already been talking to our health agent who had been around back in the 90s when industry first started coming into our communities with cell towers. Industry literally wined and dined our municipal agents in fancy hotel ballrooms to get them all lathered up about having better cell service by putting cell towers right inside your town. And when somebody at those meetings would raise their hand and go, but what about the biological effects? The industry would say, oh, well, we're well within the federal communications guidelines for public radiation exposure limits. That's their party line, but we know better. Those limits were never safety tested. So by the third go around, I had already been presenting our bills at the State House, and I figured out that my 3-minute testimony in front of our Joint Committee on Public Health blew them out of the water. They had no idea what I was talking about, and I could look at their eyes and see, nope, nobody knows this issue exists. So I thought, wow, 3 minutes isn't going to cut it. So I started going up to the State House and meeting with every legislative office that had a hand on one of these bills. And down to almost the person, every time I said, so before I start, can you please share with me what you might know about the biological effects of wireless tech? All but one out of hundreds that I spoke to at our State House, all but one said, gee, until you brought it up, I didn't know anything about it. This one gentleman had recently gotten out of law school, and he said, yeah, I know a bit about this. Why don't you tell me what you came to say? And at the end of our 40-minute talk, he revealed to me that his father was the physicist who took the team into Chernobyl after it blew. So he grew up knowing about man-made radiation. He was the only one, though. So that taught me that I need to really get in and educate people, which is why I do what I do every month with our co-hosts. And we just provide the facts to whomever we can get to listen. And so by the third time, I met one by one with each member of our select board, and I educated them, and then they approved my grant on the condition that our library would agree to take it into circulation. So a few things about libraries. Back at this time, I got the idea for a library to put a meter on loan because when the energy industry were taking away our more healthy incandescent light bulbs and replacing them with CFLs, those, by the way, throw off a nasty form of man-made energy that's biologically active. One of their marketing campaigns was to put a kilowatt meter donated on loan in all of our public libraries, thinking that you would take that home, measure how much energy your incandescent light bulb used, then measure the new CFL light bulb and go, whoa, I'm going to save a couple $100 every year. So heck yeah, I'm getting those new light bulbs. That's how I got the idea. They already had a meter that had a barcode on it for the public to take out. So it took me 3 tries, and then I had to go in front of the board at the library and get their blessing. And one gentleman sat there with his arms crossed, and you could just see he had hogwash written all over his forehead. And he said, yeah, I don't think so. And then one woman on the board said, well, I want to get that meter and take it home and see what's going on. And a third one said, well, regardless of how we feel personally, we are a conduit of information in our community. So I say we take a vote. And they voted 4-1 to allow me to have this grant for $400 to put back in 2016, this acoustimeter on loan at the library. Since then, the Safe and Sound Pro 2 has been developed, and this is the one that we would probably recommend today because you can plug it in. It's got a jack in it. And that way, for people who are very sensitive, you could just leave it running so that you know if somebody walks in your space or your house and it goes off, you can, nip it in the bud right there. So it's got a few other features that this earlier one doesn't have, but they're both really fine devices, calibrated and very credible. So we were the first in the nation in Ashland Public Library in Massachusetts, and then people around the country learned what we were doing, and they started going to their libraries and either donating it, or like in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, where Verizon turned a cell tower on top of a neighborhood that made 17 children and adults so sick they had to abandon their home. Their own Board of Health determined the homes were no longer habitable. Pittsfield just paid for it out of their budget at their library, and now they've got the Safe and Sound Pro 2. Sunderland in Massachusetts just got one. Hillsdale, New York just got one. And if for some reason your library can't afford the $400, and we really do encourage you to get a good meter. I've been told lately that a couple libraries near us have gotten something called like the GQ 390 or something. And it's only in the $100 range, and you get what you pay for, and it misses a lot of the signals. So you really want to get a good meter. If your library can't afford that, or they can only afford partial, please have them reach out. It can't be you or I, it has to be the librarian. Have the library reach out to the Environmental Health Trust, because they've got a small grant fund and they would be more than happy to help your community get one of these meters. So again, solutions for everything. So a lot of us had figured out that what we started with like 50 mainstream media outlets, they've been bought up and they've been bought up and they've been bought up and bought up. And now we're down to the same 4 to 6 conglomerations that own just about all of mainstream media. So they control the messaging. So as good as journalists are, they can't report on this because their funding either comes through revenue from the telecom and energy industries, or they're just outright owned by these companies, these conglomerates that also own the telecom companies. So that's why we don't hear about this very often in mainstream media. Or when we do, they'll say, oh, more science is needed. It's not. We can always do more science and get finer and finer tuned, but we have enough today to know that we need to invoke the precautionary principle. So one of the last bastions of independent reporting available in our communities is our local cable stations. So my local cable station has been wonderful over the years. They love to do projects for citizens in the community. And I've done a whole bunch of public service announcements, little ones, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, that they run on our cable station. And then they were so kind to come to my home, and we did a walkthrough with their camera. And I talked about what an average home uses today with these wireless exposures. You know, the microwave oven, the corded or the keyboard, the mouse, the laptops, the computers, the utility meters mounted on the walls. And so I do a walkthrough of my home and show the readings and then make suggestions for how you could remediate that. So that one has helped over 10,000 people to date, which is really nice. And then I was brought in as a guest on a couple of programs out in Worcester, Massachusetts to talk about this. And one day the manager of that studio said, Cece, you should just have your own program. So every 2 weeks, or the second and fourth Friday of every month, I go into Worcester and I have a half-hour segment that I do. And that's how we got those 2 videos with David and with Hank that we dropped into the chat for you guys. So we want to get everybody's stories out there. We want to share what's happening. We want to give the updates that we're not getting through mainstream media. So if you have a story to tell, reach out to me. It would be my honor to have you on with us. We can do it by Zoom. We love having people in the studio if you're local, but we can certainly do it by Zoom too. So look to your community. What can you do? I bet you could get a library to put a meter on loan. And you can say, look, we're falling behind. All these other ones already have it. Nobody likes to be, falling behind in the competition. And then if you secure time at your cable station, invite me in. I'll be on the other end of the Zoom, and we can do something that can run in your community. So Let us know. Educating is my happy place here. All right, so we don't want you to take our word on any of this. We want you to know the facts for yourself. And if anything that we tee up makes it easier for you, as it did for David when he fell down the rabbit hole, take our information and dive in. So let's look first at the long-term effects, and then we'll look at the short-term effects. So again, for years, the industry got away with this by saying there's no mechanism of harm identified, so let's just keep doing what we're doing. Well, now we know a lot better. Our own government, the U.S. National Toxicology Program, which is part of the National Institutes of Environmental Health Sciences, they are by and large the gold standard for toxics research in the world. The largest study they've ever done on anything, $30 million to see if cell phones are safe. They began this 2 decades ago. And at the end of the day, they brought in world-leading experts whose life's work is microwave radiation. And after an unprecedented 3-day peer review at the National Institutes of Health, they concluded clear evidence of cancerous tumors and DNA damage. Now, clear evidence is the top of 5 categories they can assign. The top. That should have triggered public policy to protect you and I, and we'll teach you about why that didn't happen. DNA damage. So most of us know that DNA is the roadmap to grow a proper anything, from a little wee person to a plant, to a pollinator, to a tree, to any biome. If we mess with the DNA, we're not going to get the results we were supposed to get. Infertility. So it was these studies that got me on my feet and got me advocating in this space. I started reading the science and I saw that they have taken male human sperm, exposed it to a laptop with the multiple antennas radiating, and it changed the DNA. It slowed the motility of the sperm, and it caused far fewer sperm to be viable, or what in the medical community is called apoptosis, or programmed cell death. It was killing the sperm in just 4 hours of exposure. And I went, you've got to be kidding me. Our oldest daughter had just gone off to college with her MacBook. Our youngest daughter had gone into high school, and we thought we'd give her a leg up. So for Christmas, we gave her a laptop. And where are both my girls using it, but right on top of their reproductive organs? And since then, Kaiser Permanente has done a really good study on women who are using wireless tech and higher miscarriage rates. So there's study upon study on infertility, but that's the day I found my voice and went, you've got to be kidding me. We need to do something here. Neurotoxicity. So our poor nervous systems are getting jackhammered with microwaves all the time. We know that our Earth has this beautiful healing energy that every living cell on the planet is meant to be synchronized to. The Earth gives us this beautiful healing pulse, 7.83 times per second, or 7.83 hertz. That is something now called Schumann's resonance. It was a scientist named Schumann who figured this out. So Schumann's resonance is 7.83 cycles per second. When we got so fancy with digital technology, we started sending signals in the megahertz range. Mega means a million. 1 million times per second. We're getting jackhammered with this spiked erratic pulsation of microwaves. Then we developed the gigahertz range. Giga means billion. 1 billion times per second, we are getting hammered with these microwaves when we're supposed to be way down here at 7.83. So it comes as no surprise when we look at the science that we have epidemics of neurotoxicity. Even before the pandemic, we were at epidemic levels, literally, of anxiety and depression. We're seeing suicidal ideation like we have never seen before among children and adults. We now know scientifically this is changing the structures of the brain, the gray matter, the white matter. ADD and ADHD, Dr. Hugh Taylor heads up the OB/GYN program at Yale Medical School. And he has done the lab experiments with pregnant mice and exposed them to microwave radiation from a cell phone for a certain number of hours a day. And when the little mice gave birth, the pups came out and started exhibiting behavior much like a child with ADD or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, literally bouncing off the walls of the cage with not a care in the world, no focus, like what we see in a lot of children today. Dr. Martha Herbert has retired as a pediatric neurologist from Harvard. She founded the Autism Lab at Massachusetts General Hospital, and she sees huge connections between what we know scientifically happens with microwaving the brain and what is happening or was happening to the families in her care. Alzheimer's, Dr. Martin Pall culled all the science around Alzheimer's, and he reports that we used to see Alzheimer's in our 90s or our 80s, and then it started happening in our 70s, our 60s, our 50s, even in our 40s and 30s now, and in rare cases in our 20s. We cannot continue to pollute the environment of the brain and expect that we're just going to be fine. We're not. And we're not. Look at our world. 50% have chronic illnesses, and it's cumulative with exposure over time. So those numbers are only going to increase. So as much as mainstream media keeps this out of our line of sight, we're so grateful when well-known advocacy groups begin to take up this issue. And many of you may know the Environmental Working Group. As a mom, I first knew of their work because every year they put out these fact sheets called the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen about all the pesticides that are in our conventionally grown foods. So I already had high regard for them. Now they have gotten funding and they have a PhD on staff, and they come out now with fact sheets and they do some political action. So if you go out to the Environmental Working Group at this link in my slides, you will find things like this one: protecting kids from wireless radiation in school and at home. And here they have another one on the effects on the nervous system. So know your audience, because by now, the industry has conditioned everybody out there. As soon as you open your mouth and go, oh, I think there's something wrong with wireless signals, everyone is conditioned to go, tinfoil hat, conspiracy theorist, I don't have to listen to that. But when we can bring credible resources written in a way that they can understand and digest, that's really helpful. But first, you want to show them the fine print in their own device and then measure it for them. Now you've got their attention. So Environmental Working Group, we're so grateful for everything that they do. And we need to understand that children are not just little adults. They are under construction. Their central nervous system, their immune system are still under construction. And this is a neurotoxin and it's an immunosuppressant. And Dr. Om Gandhi and his colleagues did this modeling of this invisible exposure. What happens when we put a cell phone up to our ear? So his head models here are sideways with the little yellow dot being the ear. When you and I put a cell phone up to our fully formed skull, that microwaves about a third of our brain. And most people only use their phone on one side of their head. And then we see the glioblastomas, the acoustic neuromas, the thyroid cancers after a number of years. On a 10-year-old child, that radiation goes about 3/4 of the way into the brain. And on a 5-year-old child, they're microwaving almost the entire brain. So we have got to do our best, come out of our comfort zone and protect our children. And we're going to give you some ideas for that. But literally, our children don't stand a chance if we don't stand up for them. So never give a child a radiating device. Always put it in full airplane mode with all those antennas turned off. And then make sure whatever you're giving them on that device, whatever you've downloaded, is evidence-based. It's not teaching them, you know, Tommy Tomcat scratching and fighting and let's do good things for kids.
Cece?
Yes.
The screens are designed to blind you. The
Yeah,
screens
there
are
is-
called transient screen blindness, TSB, transient screen blindness, when you look at the phone and then you look up at the road, let's say. But
Mhm.
they are designed to burn the back of the eye, which can turn the retinic acid into cyanide. You have
Oh,
20
goodness.
seconds to live with adenosine triphosphate is can't get through to replenish.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. I was also meeting with Dr. Holly Groh today, who's a corneal surgeon, and she said we now have an epidemic of myopia, which means we're changing the shape of the eyeball because we're spending all our time at this short distance, when as humans, we are meant to be scanning the horizon perpetually. That's what keeps our eyeball shaped round the way it's meant to be. But because we leave ourselves for hours upon hours in the shallows of a screen, it's literally changing the shape of our eyes and our children too.
And the heat also causes cataracts.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, so let's look at some of these additional short-term effects now. And the good news is that after one of these training sessions, people come back to me time and again going, Cece, I didn't want to know this. I didn't want to believe it. I live on my devices, but dang it, if what you told me didn't ring true. And I had the courage to create a sleep sanctuary at night, and I started scaling back, and so many of these symptoms just went away or got significantly better. So please know that due to the work of Elizabeth Kelly and others over the last 20 years, the Americans with Disabilities Act and their organizations like the Jobs Area Network, like the Indoor Air Quality Groups, they already have statements and recommendations for accommodations out there. So this also is a good link to help lend credibility to this issue for people who've never heard of it. Say, look, the ADA already knows about it. Insomnia. So many people don't sleep right anymore, and sleep is what children, and especially teenagers, always did best when I was growing up. They couldn't get enough sleep, and now we have kids who don't sleep anymore. And now we know the mechanism of harm. In the wee hours of darkness, as part of our circadian rhythm, mind you, we are beings of light. We operate off of the light and the dark cycle. During our sleep hours, in the wee hours of darkness, the pineal gland is meant to release melatonin from the brain that then goes in and regulates your sleep. And it also helps to clear out the toxins of the day through the bloodstream. Well, when we leave this stuff pulsating around us all night long, the brain's over there going, when's it going to get dark so I can release that melatonin? So we know why these things are happening. And the beauty of it is just turn it all off. Everything that is on your device, your clock, your alarm, your camera, anything you've downloaded for entertainment, any apps that you just use on the device, they're there to use. You don't need the signals going back and forth to access what's on your device. Any eye care practitioner will tell you, you shouldn't be looking at little screens, let alone the big ones. The little ones are especially bad for the eyes for all the reasons that were just given us. Headaches, stabbing, searing headaches, migraines, nosebleeds, ear bleeds, fatigue, chronic fatigue syndrome, pain from unidentified sources. So here's another mechanism of harm. It's something called rouleau formation. And in my little brain, that sounded an awful lot like the candy Rolos, that stacked up chocolate caramel in a sleeve. Well, think of those as our red blood cells. Our red blood cells are meant to be free-floating, nice, oval, round shapes of blood that are meant to free float and bring oxygen to all of our systems and organs. When you look under a microscope before and after exposing your red blood cells to this radiation, what we see in the after is those nice oval round shapes are looking like bottle caps, and then they start sticking together. Remember, electromagnetic field. They're glomming together and forming this chain that then can't find its way into getting to where it needs to go. And now you're not getting the oxygen from your red blood cells. So if you're talking to your doctors and you're talking about chronic illnesses, oxidative stress is a precursor to most of these chronic illnesses. So when we can't get oxygen, we're in a bad way. So skin abnormalities. Like all creatures on Earth, we are meant to be synchronized with our environment. We have little antennas in the surface of our skin. That's our little mechanism for knowing, gee, is it too cold? Is it too hot? Do I need to go do something to make sure I keep myself safe and protected? Well, when we're out there radiating ourselves, we are really disrupting all of the signaling that's in our skin, and our skin feeds into every other organ in our body. So our largest organ is our front line, and we're dysregulating all of that with these microwaves. So we have people who will talk about getting the hot ear, getting flushing in their skin, getting tingling, itching, burning, or even nerve damage from maybe carrying their cell phone in their pants pocket. So lots of skin things going on there. Again, folks, we are bioelectrical chemical beings. We have little whispers going on through electrical signals all throughout our bodies 24/7, and we get overpowered with these man-made signals. So irregular heartbeats, blood sugars and stuff that are going way out of normal range, palpitations, arrhythmias, chest pains, feeling like somebody's sitting on your chest, high or low blood pressure, depending on your own body's proclivity there, difficulty breathing, our lungs, another major electrical organ, cognitive impairment where, we can't remember what we were doing. We can't hold a thought. And as we age, our cognitive abilities naturally slowly decline. But now we're seeing this in everybody. Anger and behavior issues. So it was heartbreaking in that EMF medical conference to sit there and listen to these doctors saying, and these scientists saying, if we don't get a hold of this, we will continue to damage the brain in the areas where people would normally make reasoned decisions. And we can well expect to see many more of these societal outbursts like we have been seeing. The mass shootings, when the kids were allowed to go back to school. In like 1 week, we had 3 different news reports of 3 different schools where kids were literally wailing on their classmates with the Chromebook because they could no longer regulate their behavior, and they had this radiating device in their hands. I was at a yoga class recently, and I was chit-chatting with a young woman in there, and it turns out she was a guidance counselor at one of our high schools nearby, and she had a colleague who was out on disability because one of the kids wailed on her with his tablet. So it's happening. And we know this is a critical factor that we can solve. And again, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation off the charts like we've never seen. And everything that we talk about for us, it's happening to every biocell on the planet. This is a good link to go in and look at some of these incredible resources that we have. Our friends at the Environmental Health Trust have recently launched a new website with all the science and what we need to do to fix it, important inroads that are happening, and it's a beautiful website, easy to look at. So Wildlife, Wireless, and the Environment. And in a snapshot, our poor little pollinators are meant to be synchronized with that Earth's electromagnetic field. The birds, the bees, they've all got like magnetite and other things in their brains and in their beaks that synchronizes them to the Earth so they can navigate. Well, what happens when we put this huge layer of electrosmog in? It ruins their navigation system if it doesn't just outright zap them. So that's happening. And then for climate change, back in 2012, there was a Greenpeace analyst who said if the cloud were a country, it would be the 5th largest consumer of energy in the world. And that was a dozen years ago. And look at how much more technology and wireless we have had imposed on us. So we can't keep doing what we're doing and think we're going to have a planet left to do it on. And then there are others who will tell you about the atrocities going on down in the Congo and others. There's like dozens of minerals that go into every one of our devices. If we really understood the human toll and the environmental toll, we would never just go buy the latest and greatest because that's what they're pitching to us on TV. We would use everything up to its full useful life, use it as minimally as we can. And when we're done with it, make sure we recycle it and reuse everything that they took to make these devices. The data warehouses, the networks, the personal devices, streaming consumes huge amounts of energy. Every time we send and receive, every time we charge and recharge, we're using energy, as are all those apps that we got seduced into putting on our stuff. Get rid of the ones you're not using all the time, because in the background, they're doing updates and that's using energy. So once we know better, we can definitely do better. But why don't we know? Well, we talked about the media and how the media is owned by these industries that benefit financially from all of this technology. And back in 2015, Harvard Law School Center for Ethics came out with this amazing report called Captured Agency: How the Federal Communications Commission is Dominated by the Industries it Presumably Regulates. And note that on their cover, they put a revolving door, and that's what most of our federal agencies have become today. They're just soapboxes for industry. And this is a really good online free report that brings that to light. ProPublica in recent years has done another good expose on how the FCC shields the cell phone companies from safety concerns. And then remember that $30 million study that our government did with the National Toxicology Program that found clear evidence of cancer and DNA damage? That was supposed to trigger public policy. Now, the folks who started the investigation on this, the scientists who were qualified 20 years ago, they've long since retired or passed away. The gentleman at the FDA who's in charge of radiation today on the consumer side is this Dr. Jeffrey Shuren. And if you go look him up, you find that he's married to a woman who's a partner in a law firm that represents, guess who? Big Wi-Fi and all the other big environmental polluters. So we have conflicts of interest at every turn, at every level of government. There are definitely some good people out there, but it's going to take you and I organizing and speaking up and building that pressure from the bottom before we're going to see any meaningful change happen up above. Sadly, it goes all the way up to the World Health Organization. You wouldn't know it, but there's two groups up at the WHO that deal with electromagnetic fields and radio frequency. One is funded by industry, and the other has been the scientists who are actually qualified to weigh in on public policy on this. And once the US completed that $30 million cancer study, the industry will spin and say, oh, that's just one study. You need more than one study. Well, right upon the heels of our big study, the Ramazzini Institute in Italy concluded another multi-million-dollar study from cell phone base stations, the towers, that showed cancers and DNA damage and everything that we found here. So back in 2011, the World Health Organization had done an initial investigation into this, and they classified radio frequency electromagnetic fields as a group 2B possible human carcinogen. Now that's right in the middle of 5 categories. What they were missing back in 2011 in the scientific literature were the animal studies. Now we have them. That's what the NTP study was, and that's what the Ramazzini study was. So now the scientists are saying we need to reopen this investigation and think about reclassifying this at least as a group 2A, which is a probable human carcinogen. But the ones who really have done the science are saying it needs to be a group 1, known human carcinogen. So we were very excited that they reopened their investigation, but once again, money talks. And it looks like the industry has commandeered this investigation as well, and they're going to drag it out while they put more and more toxins into our world. So that's why we don't know. So folks, that's all the bad news. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about what we can do. We're going to start with what you can do to have better control over the devices that you bought. So on the back of your router, or the bottom or somewhere on there, you're going to find Ethernet ports like we always used to do. And then you just need to get a big long cable and run it, an Ethernet cable, run it to wherever you're using most of your technology. And again, if you have to buy something new, pay the extra couple bucks and get a shielded Ethernet cable that will block the electric and magnetic fields that come off of a standard wire. So if you can pay for that little upgrade, it's worth it. Most of us in our houses today have more than one device that we'd like to use safely. So think of this little thing as an extension box for electronics. Literally, that one is only this big. This is the box that mine came in. And I would plug the main Ethernet cable into one of these outlets. And then that carries the signal off to all of these other outlets. And for every Ethernet cable I plug in, I get a direct signal. So I'm not competing with everybody in the house like these crummy Wi-Fi systems do. I get a direct, screaming fast, reliable, sustainable, energy efficient connection, because wireless systems consume 10 times more energy than if we just used hardwired technology. So plug in all your devices to your switch box. And then if you don't have an Ethernet port in your device, all you need to do is go look up your make and model and find out how to get the adapter or the little dongle. And again, most of these solutions aren't going to break the bank, or maybe you can scrimp and save and cut corners elsewhere. Probably for less than $100, you can hardwire your house. So once you have everything connected by wires and plugged into your device, the next step, step 2, is to go in and turn off all the antennas, every one of them, in your phones, in your laptops, in your tablets, in your router. I just called up, once I hardwired my house, I just called up my internet service provider and said, I'm choosing hardwired technology. But when I go measure that box that's down in my basement, it's sending my meter off the charts. How do I fix that? And they said, oh, that's easy. Sit down at your computer. And I went, really? They said, yeah. So the customer service rep just walked me through how to get into my account online. And then he told me how to get to wireless settings. And I clicked on that. And then I saw there was a 2.4 gigahertz antenna and a 5 gigahertz antenna. All I had to do was go off, hit the apply button and wait a few seconds. And then I went down and measured again, and literally radio silence. It was a beautiful thing. But some companies are using you and your router to throw signal out to the curb so their customers driving by can pick up your signal, which, by the way, is using your electricity. So it's just unconscionable on so many levels. But they will also put these public hotspot antennas on your router. So you need to make sure to look and see if you've got those on there. So any antennas you can find, turn them off, and all your communications will go through the wires. And as I mentioned earlier, when you're not on the go, you don't need mobile technology. You can go into your settings, and on my iPhone, for example, if I go into the settings and look at phone, I have an option to forward my cell phone calls to a landline. So that's what I do. And now actually nobody calls me on my cell phone because everybody knows I turn it on maybe once a week if I'm teaching, and that's about it. So yeah, forward your cell phone calls to the landline, and then you can put this in full airplane mode with no antennas radiating. But because the industry is forecasting that every home will have 200 wirelessly connected devices for 5G and the Internet of Things, you really need to get a hold of a meter. So get one for your library if that's the way you want to go. If you're fortunate to be able to pay $400 out of pocket, go get one. We have people who go in with their neighbors or with their loved ones, and everyone just shares it amongst themselves. But you really need to measure. I'll give you an example. Our stove, 26 years later, finally bit the dust. And my husband brought one home, and it had a smart Wi-Fi logo on it. And I went, uh-oh. I looked in the settings. There was nowhere for me to disable that. I pulled out the manual. I found the RF setting disclaimer. and it said, stay, I don't know, was it 8 centimeters or 20 centimeters away? I'm like, well, how the heck am I going to cook my food on this device if I got to stand in the middle of my kitchen and I don't want to be the one cooking myself in there? So I wound up having to call tech support, and they sent somebody to my home. He wound up just taking off the back panel, and behind the digital display was the motherboard. Right next to that motherboard was this little tiny board. He just went and unplugged it. That's all. I was at 1,090,000 with that new stove. When we unplugged it, I was back down in my clean green in my home. So I paid a tech guy in my town, $80 to open up my television set because there was nothing in the settings. I contacted the manufacturers. There was no way for me to disable the Wi-Fi antenna in there. So I took it down to this guy. I said, hey, I don't want this radiation. And, for his time and labor, $80. And he took that antenna out, and it just looks like a tiny little circuit board with a little port on it. It's not intimidating. It's just there. So that's 5G and the Internet of Things. They want to hook everything up. They want to harvest your data. They want to sell your data. It's a new revenue stream for them. So that's the bulk of what I wanted to share with you today. So you feel empowered to do something to start reducing your exposure levels. But I don't want to let you leave without telling you about where these other exposures are coming from that you may or may not have a choice around. The next one is the utility digital or smart meters. When I was a little kid, I'm one of 10 children. So we spent a lot of time playing outside, and we'd do hide and seek, and I'd be hiding in the bushes. And to keep myself occupied, I'd sit there and watch the little dials go around on our utility meters. Maybe it was gas or water or electric. Today we also have solar and maybe propane. But all of those analog meters were safe. They were just mechanical devices that measured our usage of whatever the utility was. And then they had meter readers come by once a month, take down our numbers, and then we would get our bill. That was a safe system. Those devices lasted 40 or 50 years. And then with innovation and progress, they started coming up with these digital meters. So if you look at your meter outside or inside your home, in your basement, wherever these things are mounted, if you see an FCC identification number on it, that's there because that thing is transmitting microwave radiation. Anything with an FCC ID number on it is transmitting radio frequency. The industry will tell us that these only pulse a couple seconds a day. Well, when I was preparing to testify before the Massachusetts Public Utilities Commission, I sat down in my living room where we've got 2 meters mounted, one for our regular electric and one for the electric for the solar system that my husband wanted to get. I wish we didn't do that. But anyway, I sat there and I measured, and when I did the math, those meters were pulsating 17,000 times a day around the clock. So if you have a child or a pregnant woman or an elderly person or anybody with an existing health condition, they are really in a vulnerable spot. Or heaven forbid, you get a bank of these mounted on an apartment or a condo complex. We know far too many people whose electromagnetic illnesses started when those smart meters went in. So they pulse this radiation continuously. And remember, we talked about how microwaves amplify around metal. Well, when you have all these signals coming in, they can literally hop on the wiring or the pipes of the house if things aren't properly done, and turn your whole home, all through your wires and pipes, into one giant radiating antenna. Far too many stories and reports on fires and explosions from improper grounding. And again, huge privacy issues here. And at the medical conference, we were taught that when these do go in, the doctors are seeing huge upticks in people coming in with all these microwave sickness symptoms. And this is a huge environmental justice issue. As with many of the environmental polluters, these corporations come into our towns, sell our leaders on the benefits, throw some money at them, and then they say, sure, we can do this here, or sure, we can do a pilot program here in Worcester, Massachusetts for the smart grid. Why not? We're getting some money. Well, they go into these impoverished communities where there are often language barriers, where people are working 2 or 3 jobs just to keep food on the table and a roof over the head. And these horrible corporate partners come in, parlay their toxic products and say, hey, look, it was successful here, so now we're going to roll it out all across the state. Or, hey, look, New York, hey, Rhode Island, Connecticut, look how successful we were in Massachusetts. You are falling way behind the times. You better jump on the bandwagon. So that's part of their game book too. But there's some really good ways to teach people about these smart meters. And TED Talks can be really powerful. Jeremy Johnson was a Silicon Valley engineer married to a medical doctor. Both he and his wife became suddenly very ill, very neurotoxic. Nothing in her medical background could teach them what the heck was going on. And they finally figured it out. Those smart meters came into their condo. And then he does a wireless wake-up call for his TED Talk. And then Dr. Alexia McKnight, ironically, is a large animal veterinary radiologist. So her life's work is radiation. And she didn't know about the low-level, non-ionizing, non-thermal harm from wireless. And a smart meter went in on her home, and she didn't realize it. And she started getting really neurotoxic. And then something malfunctioned. They came and they took it off, and her symptoms all got better. And then when they came back and put the second one on, her symptoms all resumed. And so she finally figured out that connection. But before she did, she was out in traffic with her daughter in the car. She was so neurotoxic, she could not remember if that green light meant stop or go. And through the grace of God, she made the right choice and got home safely that day. But here's a professional who works with radiation, and she had no idea. So she gives a really good TED Talk as well. So our own devices, the utility smart meters, and now we have to look at the cell towers.
Hey,
So it started out, yeah,
Got a question for you.
sure.
Do you know of anybody? I just ordered some Faraday cage fabric online. Have you found that to work fairly well? And have you had anybody wrap that around their smart meters?
There are the first thing to do is to ask your town or your energy provider if they can swap it out for a non-radiating device. Some will.
They don't want to do that here in Idaho.
Yeah, many will say no. So you can buy a little thing that goes over the front with screening on it that will still allow them to get the signal, but it reduces the radiation outside by 90-something%. And then on the back side, where it's up against your home,
Right.
you need to get some sort of metal shielding inserted in there between the home and that. So yeah, shielding, like the CDC says, when you're exposed to radiation, you either create distance, you reduce your time, or you shield. So there are definitely products out there. And if you go to Jeremy Johnson's website, it's called emfanalysis.com, emfanalysis.com. He has a list of recommended products, and he's lived the nightmare and he's tried everything. So he makes some really good recommendations to some very highly reputable places. He also does online consultations. You can pay a small fee to book, 15 or a half an hour with him, 15 minutes or half an hour, or to send him 4 questions and he will answer those for you. So there's help at every turn, but shielding, as you say, is very important. I actually sleep in a shielded bed canopy. It's beautiful. It looks like, Knights of Arabia or something. It looks like this pretty gauze, but it's actually got metal woven into these fine fibers that creates a mesh shield that is so tiny that these larger microwaves can't get in. And again, I don't take anything on faith. I crawled inside my canopy with my meter and saw that I was down under like 0.1 microwatts per square meter.
Oh, wow. And where'd you get that from?
I think I bought mine through Safe Living Technologies. They're the same ones who sell the Safe and Sound Pro 2 meter.
All right.
Okay. David, great question. Thank you. So cell towers started off in industrial parks far away from where we lived, where we went to school, where we worshiped, where we played in our recreation areas. And then they started encroaching closer and closer and closer. And the way the industry wrote this telecommunications bill from 1996, is that you can't really complain about environmental harm, but you might be able to put some guardrails around this based on aesthetics and historical impact to your community. And if you can make it look like the environment, then, well, you can put a cell tower there. So that's why now we often see a tall building, because they want their signals to be able to go out from high areas to reach more customers. You'll see a brown building with all these cell tower antennas mounted on it that are painted brown too, or whatever color the building is. That's because aesthetically they can do that, and the property owner's getting a kickback. But it's really bad for the inhabitants of that building. So industry will always tell our towns it's all fine, it's all within the FCC guidelines, but the FCC, as we'll see in a moment, has been sued for ignoring all the science, and it's not safe. So it's critically important to direct our towns to the non-industry funded science. And when we look at that, they tell us that the studies out in society that are called epidemiological studies, they show that within a certain distance of these cell antennas, you have a higher death rate, a higher neurotoxicity rate, insomnia, headaches, nosebleeds, all of it, skin problems, heart problems, anxiety, depression, all of it. That curve starts coming down at 500 meters or 1,640 feet. It starts coming down. It doesn't actually catch up to the general population to almost double that. And in sensitive areas where you have children, the elderly, the infirmed, pregnant women, they recommend at least a half a mile distance from
And
the
case in point, CC Hank's problem, his tower, I think, is 2,000 feet from his house.
Yeah, 600
But
meters.
he is also in the crosshairs between another tower and the meter readings we've taken. It's at I think minus 54. I mean, it's really high. It's a really high rate. So because just so much data, and it's worse in the afternoon when everyone's driving home on their phones.
Yeah, it's just unconscionable what they've done. And knowingly, not everybody in the industry even knows this problem exists, but the ones who do are the ones who are making the policies. So it's just, so know your science, go in, or at least know where to point to the science. This Understanding EMFs is my personal research repository, because I got in way over my head. And then I couldn't remember where I had seen information I wanted to reread or share with somebody. So being a tech writer, I just created a very simple research repository and started creating categories that became my navigation. So we've got the science, we've got the military experts, because this came out of our military as radar for warfare weaponry. And then they brought it in the commercial space. So lots and lots of good resources that I use personally to help me keep on top of all of this. But this is what neighborhoods are starting to look like if we don't work with our towns to put protections in place. Anybody here in the US can go to antennasearch.com and type in your address or your work address or whatever address, and it will return for you a 3-mile radius of how many cell towers and antennas for the macro cells, the big antennas, there are in a 3-mile radius. I've got a couple hundred around my 3-mile radius. In downtown Boston, when I put in the State House address, there's more than 4,500 of these antennas that shoot for miles, overlapping one another for cumulative damage. So our cities have just become, woo, a lot of people can't go into the cities anymore. And then all that's left to monetize are these tiny little millimeter waves. So right now, most of our signals are being carried for 3G and 4G with these longer wavelengths that are able to penetrate objects like our floors and ceilings and walls and windows. And that's how our signal gets indoors to us. But those signals are going through us to get to our devices. And they pretty much maxed out the licensing monetary gains on those larger frequencies. All that's left now are these little millimeter waves. And so their idea is to promise that you will have faster entertainment downloads, smart cities, super highways, woohoo. but it means an additional layer of man-made radiation. And our friends at Safe Tech Hawaii have a really good little 5 or 6 minute video here on what is 5G and what it isn't. But as the industry and all the ads that you see start promoting all these fast downloads and stuff, what are you downloading? Your entertainment. Who owns the entertainment industry? Well, guess whose parent companies are buying out the entertainment industry? So again, they control the messaging, they control the products, and they control the purse strings. So they're adding on this new layer that can't go through objects. And their goal, because these little millimeter waves can't go very far, they're powerful, but they can't go very far. They need to be right where your devices are. Their goal is to put a new cell tower called a small cell every 2 to 12 houses inside our neighborhoods at the curb in our public access way, right at bedroom height. So people are literally waking up to cell towers showing up at the curb outside their homes, 24/7 radiation, unless we inform our towns and work with them and update our zoning code. And here in our climate era, the cities are wanting to have big tree canopies to cool in the summer and save energy. And here comes industry lopping off those trees so their signals from these close range small cells can get to your devices. So it's just bad on so many layers. Senator Richard Blumenthal was testifying in Congress before the Commerce Committee, and he said to these two industry leaders, so please share with us, how much money have you invested in independent science to show that this was safe before bringing it to market? And these two industry guys walked around in circles and then ultimately were made to say, we don't know of any funding that's been done for independent science. So Senator Blumenthal said, so as far as health and safety are concerned, we're flying blind here. And that's what they do. Take action, ask questions later, right? But that's a really good 4-minute clip that's powerful for our municipal leaders to hear and our legislators. And then even worse, they're spinning it up. You're going to have all these great downloads. Well, Computer World and others are reporting that 5G is a joke. It doesn't even give us very much improved service. So it's just another revenue stream, but it's a high electropollutant. Now, Dr. Magda Havas, who's the co-chair of the EMF Medical Conference, she is Professor Emerita from Trent University up in Canada. She taught electromagnetism for decades up there, and she recognizes that most of our governments are not monitoring this. So where's a person to go and how would they know where there might be lower or higher exposures? So she is asking us as citizen scientists who invest in one of these Safe and Sound Pro 2 meters to serve as a citizen scientist in your town. She's got a little protocol you can put on a clipboard, grab a friend or grab somebody who works from your town and bring them with you, and go out and take measurements according to her protocol and then enter those measurements into her database. And then she asks, can you brag about your community? BRAG, B for blackout, high, very high radiation, R for high, A for amber is medium, G for green is relatively low. Indoors, we want to be at 10 or less. Outdoors, unless you're right under something that's transmitting. If you're moving around and the environment is 1,000, if you cleaned up at home, your body might be able to do that cleanup and repair during your sleep. So outdoors, the measurement should be 1,000 or less. But what does it look like for real? At a very, remote fire department up in New Hampshire, it was in the green. Keene, New Hampshire, when they took this measurement, was in the yellow, but they've since started putting these small cells in. So if we were to remeasure, we're pretty certain it would be red or black. So this is what's happening in our towns today as industry pushes these in. And in the north end of Boston, that's our wonderful, highly touristy, trafficked area for our amazing Italian restaurants and bakeries. And note there are homes up above the storefronts. And at the curb where everybody's trucking by, they put in these beautiful wrought iron things that look like lamps. These are actually 5G small cell antennas right there, literally outside people's bedroom windows. So you go down the main Hanover Street, and when you look down the side roads, they didn't even put the pretty ones in there. They put up these ugly gray monopoles, literally 5 feet from people's bedroom windows. And when we measured down there in the north end where all this stuff was, we were getting readings over 500,000, and we want to be at 1,000 or less. This is the electrosmog in our cities today. But as Dr. Martin Luther King taught us, when we finally make important changes in our world, it comes through 3 areas. 1, the public becomes informed and gets engaged. And that's what we're hoping to inspire today, wherever you are on your journey. Take care of yourself, take care of your loved ones, and then maybe you can ripple out a little further to your schools and to your town. Maybe to your sustainability group might be interested. Maybe your library will put on, with their friends of the library, put on programs. There are so many great films and stuff that we'll show you. So the public really has to be the grassroots catalyst, and then it eventually starts getting taken through the courts, which can take years and years, as can public policy. Public policy is usually the last thing to catch up, and that's only after we do our job to raise the issue and bring it up through the grassroots, up through the local and state to the federal. So there's no cavalry coming. We have to do the work. But there are super inroads going on right now in all of these areas. I will leave you with my slides so that you can go in and read it for yourself. But like we said, the FCC has been sued, and they ignored 11,000 pages of evidence of harm that were filed into the public record. They completely ignored it, and the courts, the Circuit Court of Appeals in DC found that the FCC was arbitrary and capricious. I had to look that up. It means they made it up. They didn't do their homework. And the court sent it back to the FCC to account for children, the elderly, those with electrical sensitivities, and the environment. And it's now in August, it'll be 3 years, and the FCC has done nothing. So we have to keep the pressure on, but there are many, many lawsuits happening all over the country, all over the world, and you are more than welcome to look at Hank's case as well as the others that Children's Health Defense are working so tirelessly on. So for any of these groups, if it's within your means to support any of our efforts in what we're doing, most of us have walked away from our real careers to do this kind of work. So we really do rely on support. So feel free to look at the legal solutions. The New Hampshire 5G Commission report is probably the strongest document that we have in our country today, and that's this one down here. And this occurred after Rep. Abrami and Deb Hodgson came down, and we talked for the afternoon, and he wrote a bill with very pointed questions. Why do Lloyd's of London and Swiss Re and AM Best and others already recognize this as a world-leading risk, and they put exclusions in their policies for EMFs and radio frequency? That means industry doesn't have coverage. Our towns don't have coverage. So when these lawsuits start happening, our town's going to be left holding the bag. So we really need to get our towns to see this clearly and get their zoning code protective and make the industry properly insure whatever equipment they're putting into our towns. Why does that legal fine print even exist that we walked through at the beginning of our presentation? Why is the FCC ignoring all the peer-reviewed science? And why are they completely focused only on thermal effects when we have study after study showing non-thermal effects at hundreds of thousands of times lower than those thermal effects? Why do we allow 100 times more radiation than other countries do? And why is nobody looking at the cumulative effect of putting a child in a classroom with 30 wireless tablets going out like a pebble in a pond in all directions, radiating the heck out of our kids and our teachers, let alone what we've got going on at home? They're trying to put Wi-Fi on the school buses. It's just insanity, and we keep repeating it, right? But with some education, we can fix this. So incredible law that got passed in 7 months in New Hampshire. By law, they had 1 year to investigate. This New Hampshire report documents the conflicts of interest with the wireless industry, the Federal Communications Commission, the Food and Drug Administration, and they make 15 recommendations to get away from using wireless for primary connectivity and instead just hardwired, bring the fiber optics or high-speed cable and copper to the premises, hook up through your router with the Ethernet cables. You know, it's not rocket science. And then all you have to do is buy little adapters for 20 or 30 bucks, hook it all up, go into your devices, turn off the antennas, and measure to make sure you got them all. It's not rocket science to fix, but every time in New Hampshire, now that the industry caught on to what we were doing, every time we try to take some of those recommendations and then turn those into laws that then have some teeth into them, industry gets in and kills everything. So there are great resources. Dr. Kent Chamberlain is now professor and chair emeritus from the University of New Hampshire. He is an electrical engineer. He was the chair of the Department of Computer and Electrical Engineering. He thought, oh, it'll be a slam dunk to serve on that commission. Of course, Wi-Fi is fine. I've been developing medical devices with it for 30 years, until he got in and looked at the science. And like Rep. Abrami, Dr. Chamberlain is an honorable man. And now in his retirement, he is now stepping forward as the president of the Environmental Health Trust. He also serves on a scientific think tank with Libby Kelly and others. So bless everybody who won't let go of this issue and is doing the work. So lots of information you can read about. Frank Clegg from Microsoft Canada sent in his testimony to underscore wireless is not even advanced technology anymore. It's outlived its useful life. We need hardwired fiber optics to and through the premises. Then we don't have to have close range cell towers to account for all the capacity needs that the industry is telling us about, because they keep pushing more product for their revenue stream, telling they need more capacity, so they need more cell towers. Well, once you hardwire, you don't need any of that. Just run it through cables and connect indoors. And then you can put the cell towers more responsibly placed far away, not where we live, not where we go to school, and certainly not on top of us in our everyday living.
Cece, Hank and I interviewed some engineers, and
Yes.
get this, you may think that wiring fiber optics to the premises may be expensive. It's actually very inexpensive, and it's less expensive than towers, because towers only have about a 5-year lifespan. They got to replace the equipment, and they're energy hogs, big time. So like our city here, they think that putting towers up, more towers, is being more green. And it's
No, we need to
completely
give them the
opposite.
Greenpeace report, and we need to send them over to the new website that Environmental Health Trust put on wireless wildlife and you. And, you know, it's all of our disappearing species going away by the dozens of species. So
People
it's
just
all
don't
there.
understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for that, David. So industry gets in and kills the bill. So we're not going to see meaningful change until you and I get enough people educated around us that they can't ignore us. But it's not just here. States all over the country have been introducing legislation, and you can dive around in there and see what some of that language is, and then start meeting with your elected officials. Set up a meeting. I'll come in and educate the heck out of them as best I can. And they come into our towns, these industries, and say, oh, here's an application. We want to put up this cell tower. It's fine. It's within the FCC guidelines. And if anybody says they have a problem with that, those are just the NIMBYs, the not in my backyard people. It's fine and nobody else cares. Well, that's another one of their statements of disinformation. If you go to Americans for Responsible Technology at this link, you will see that there are already more than 150 groups all over the country that have organized and are town by town working in their communities to put some sanity around this. So here's a bunch of examples on cell towers here in Massachusetts. And here's some of the actions that David and Hank were talking about, so that you've got some links here on how to get to these incredible inroads that they're making to stop cell towers. and what their playbook is. So how to manage cell tower placement in your town. That's all there for you to look at and to reach out to Hank and David and learn from them directly. So more examples all over our country. And our friends at Americans for Responsible Technology take the best of the best and they incorporate it into their toolkit. For example, in Burlington, Massachusetts, one of the things they put in their small cell policy is that, hey, you guys can't just come in and drop and run with your equipment. If we give approval for these applications, you have to come back every single year and recertify that it's still up to standard. And we as a town don't have the money for that recertification. So you are going to have to pay to have all that work done. And mind you, they intend to put millions of these small cells up. So that night when that policy was ratified in Burlington, Massachusetts, the attorney for Verizon was there and he said, well, my client doesn't wish to set a precedent on these annual reviews that we'd have to pay for. So we respectfully withdraw our applications. So it can be done, you guys, but nobody's coming to do it for you. You've got to do it at the local level. But take heart. A panel of our experts were brought into Stamford, Connecticut recently, and after they were educated, they said no thank you to the governor, who industry had gotten in the governor's ear, and their top largest 5 cities in Connecticut, they were about to roll out small cells on the utility poles right outside people's bedrooms. Stanford said no thank you. So it can be done. A grandmother in Connecticut in Easton figured out what 5G was, went to her boards, and they put on a moratorium that they've upped a number of times now. So lots of examples all over the world. And then for our schools, we've got some beautiful resources for you here. But again, my advice to you, and this was my hard lesson learned, even though we became the first in the United States to even have our little sign, it's just a sign and it has no teeth. If I had it to do over again, and I'm about to go down this path, I wouldn't go to the schools first. I would go to every friend I have, invite them over to my home, and together we watch this amazing film, Generation Zapped. And then I tell them what's happened since that came out in 2018. And then I show them one by one on all their devices how much they're getting radiated. And then I give them a little time to look at the resources. And then I circle back and say, okay, you guys, are you going to let your kids fry in school this next school year? Are you going to do something about the anxiety, the depression, the headaches, the nosebleeds, the nausea, the dizziness, the suicidal ideation? And once we have a good group of informed parents and grandparents have discretionary time and they know the big tobacco playbook when they see it. So our retirees are fantastic. Then go in and start working with your schools. Dr. Holly Bro, who I was meeting with today, they got a really good law passed unanimously to approach this from excessive screen time and what that's doing to our kids with the myopia and the obesity and all of that. But they have a statewide set of guidelines for best practices. They don't talk outright about the radiation, but they do start saying, hey, we got to scale back. The Netherlands, Finland, and other countries are already taking tech out because it's been such a bad distraction and they are not having better educational outcomes. We got sold the 21st century classroom by industry. And then they started doling out devices to make it easy to get it in our classrooms. And here we are with sick kids and teachers. So many excellent resources here. A great series of articles from the New York Times showing that Silicon Valley execs are sending their kids to schools with no technology, not hardwired, not wireless, no tech. Because we know biologically, children's development depends on meaningful interactions with other people, children, their peers, with nature. It depends on movement. It depends on touch with their environment. So Silicon Valley execs know that to the point where they are making their nannies sign contracts that there will be no screens around their kids. Our friends at Tech Safe Schools have a whole program built out for you to send information to your schools talking about the health risks, the legal risks, and most importantly, how to mitigate and still have excellent technology if you want the technology. Curriculum by the Massachusetts Breast Cancer Coalition, kindergarten through grade 12, already developed for prevention. You can use that. Dr. Alexia McKnight, she and I did professional development, and there's a 46-minute recording with teachers at her children's school district. We've got our little course here. We can train everybody in about a half an hour online, and it just goes on and on. There are so many resources, but do it wisely and get everybody around you educated first, and then do not back down.
Cece, where will all this be located after the?
All this will be in my slides, and when we send the video out, we will send my slides out too.
Okay, and that'll go out to everyone on this call?
Yep, everybody who registered.
Okay.
So take advantage of all the resources that we've got. We have medical textbooks now, nursing textbooks. We have resources for engineers, everyone. So I know we're going late, so I will wrap it up. But you know, even mainstream on PBS, we've got 2 episodes, and there's that award-winning Film Generations app. So use what we've got, know your audience, and use the resources. We've got them right here for you. And always measure against real biological, meaningful numbers, not the bogus government ones. So for next steps, you know, it's like with any addiction, we have to admit we have a problem. And we know that there's no safe level of man-made radiation. Once it's been determined to be a carcinogen, there's no safe level. But we want to get to as low as reasonably achievable, right? So we do these free webinars every month. We'll have friends from New Mexico co-hosting in July, and we'll have that invitation available soon. And that I will send out to everybody on my list too. But think about whether you want to work politically or just as a good citizen with your towns and set up regional forums. Let's educate a whole bunch of adjoining towns at once. We've done that. There's examples. Start where you are. Do you belong to professional organizations? Everybody's always looking for public speakers to come into their quarterly or annual meetings. That's my happy place. And there are many others with additional different qualifications than me who would love to come and educate too. So next steps. Now that tech is here to stay, we need to have safety committees around it, and we should be the ones suggesting to our towns that they do that. Make sure they know about these smart meters and that everybody should have a no-fee opt-out right not to be radiated in their own homes. And then start making our way to hardwired connections and having safe zones in our public spaces, getting our local zoning bylaws up to snuff. And most of our town attorneys are good people, good professionals, but they are no match for the telecom industry. Very few are specialists in land use and telecom law. So for short money in a town budget, like $8,500, Andrew Campanelli can be brought in to look at your particular zoning as is. He'll know what to do with your state rules. He knows inside and out what the federal stuff is because he used to work for industry till he figured out what they were doing. Now he represents citizens in their communities. He will rewrite your zoning code so it's locked tight within current law for about $8,500. So we as citizens need to go up and bring the facts and bring the science and keep showing up until they are made uncomfortable enough with where they are to grow the courage to do what needs to be done. So for today, start reducing whatever exposures you may have. Notice what's radiating. Start with baby steps. We know this is like drinking water out of a fire hose, so be gentle with yourself. And the first thing you want to do is create that sleep sanctuary however you can. Otherwise, your brain and your body can't catch up with the damage. And then make your way eventually to hardwiring with Ethernet cables and adapters. Measure everything, turn off the antennas. Start using airplane mode and only turn on the one antenna that you actually need for as short a time as you can. And look at all these beautiful fact sheets you can just print out and hand out or forward off to other people from our friends at the Environmental Health Trust. They've got a whole bunch of them.
Oh, wow. That's
yeah.
good.
Good to know, huh? So thank you, everybody. We know this has been a packed 2 hours, but if you want to stick around, I can stay for a little bit longer. David might be able to as well. But here's how to catch us. Idahoans for Safe Technology. or Idaho for safetech@gmail.com. I'm at the website for Massachusetts for Safe Technology, or you can email me directly at safetech@gmail.com. So I'll stop my screen sharing and I'll ask David if he can stick around a little bit longer.
I've actually got a client that's waiting for me. So, but
Okay.
I want to thank you. This is a lot of information. And like you said, there's, where people go, where do I start? Where do I start? Well, just start with something that you feel comfortable with would be my encouragement. And like you say, there's a lot of flyers. Start talking to your neighbors.
Yeah.
Have a little data, refer people back to. There's so much compared to when we started 4 years ago. There's so much more data there, the little videos. And you know what? You can get lists off your state website from the representatives and senators, and you can start emailing them and drip on them. And then call them up, get a conversation going.
Mhm.
And pretty soon they're going to know who you are. And then next thing you know, you're going to have a few friends. And you're going to find someone that has extra time that will take this by the horns and run with it. So it takes, though, a village to plant the seeds and fertilize them. So go forth and fertilize them seeds.
That's it, because no seed planted is ever wasted. So
That's
yeah.
right. So
Well, David, you've been so gracious to co-host with us this month, and Hank as well.
Yep.
And again, in the chat, we have Hank's story and David's story from our cable program. Feel free to look at those. You go ahead and take care of your client, and I will
Okay.
wrap us up. Thank you so
will do.
much, David.
Thanks so much for all you do.
Take care. So if anybody has questions, feel free to raise your hand, and we can answer a few questions if there are any. I know it's a lot to absorb, you guys, so I thank you for sticking in with us this long, but reach out, ask us any questions anytime along the way, and keep joining us because we do these every month for you. Learn a little, fix a little, come back, learn a little more. Lisa, go ahead and unmute.
Okay, hi. Thank you, Cece, for doing this. And I did contact you and you sent me some information. Thank you for that also.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to, my condition, I do have the cell tower a block away from my house. I do have that issue. And I did meet with my assembly woman and chief of staff, and she let me know regarding the cell tower. It's, it's there. And it's not going to go anywhere because it's already up.
Yeah, sadly, that does seem to be the way that things have gone in the past. We do have some legal action that's with a judge right now in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. And once their Board of Health investigated this issue, they believe that they determined, after consulting with state level attorneys, that Telecom Act of 1996 applies only to the siting process of a cell tower or the antennas. Once something is activated in the community, they believe that the jurisdiction now belongs to the Board of Health, and by law, it is their responsibility to address that nuisance or harm to the citizens and the environment. So there's this lawsuit in Pittsfield right now. And if the lawsuit is won, it will remove an injunction that Verizon got against that Board of Health. And it's almost unheard of for a court not to honor what the Board of Health is asking to do. So we are hopeful that Pittsfield will win this lawsuit, and then the Pittsfield Board of Health will be able to execute on this emergency order that they wrote to force Verizon to the table to come up with a solution. And mind you, in Pittsfield, there's already a commercial property owner nowhere near a neighborhood who said, I don't care, move your tower over here. And Verizon wouldn't even come to the table to discuss it. So if we can get this injunction removed that Verizon got against the Board of Health, then the Board of Health will be legally empowered to challenge in court Verizon if they choose not to come back and move that darn tower of their own volition. Verizon, of course, does not want to set that kind of precedent, so we expect that they will try and fight it as hard as they can. But this has been going on for 4 years in Pittsfield, where these families have been displaced, very, very sick. Some could not afford to move. 3 have now died of cancer. 1 has cancer that came back. And people have been living in cars, they've been living in parks, they've been living on people's couches, they've been living in tents. And we're New England. I mean, we have pretty rugged weather here. So we are very hopeful and prayerful that we will hear soon from that judge. They had oral arguments 2 weeks ago on this case. So we just all keep doing our best. But Lisa, you need to know yourself. You need to know the health of those around you, and you need to keep an eye on it. And shielding might be one of your opportunities, but you have to have a meter in hand to understand what your true exposures are, and then start making your choices from there. Somebody like David has healed himself of cancer using non-mainstream modalities. So you can reach out to wellness coaches who are getting results that sometimes mainstream solutions just are not providing. So no, there's a ton of resources out there for whatever's going on. But some people simply say, I can't deal with it, I'm moving. And then they move, but who's to say they're not going to put up a cell tower right next to you wherever you move?
Exactly. That's why I know better to do that, because I've actually heard people move and they regret it. They moved. They should have stayed at the first house. They didn't.
Yeah, they left their community, they left their friends, they left their loved ones, and then it showed up again. So we need to stay and do the legwork to educate as best and professionally as we can. We want to be careful with how we approach people, because it's understandable to be angry and in people's faces about this, but as soon as we take that approach, that ignites the amygdala, and all people can do at that juncture is go into fight, flight, or freeze mode, and they're not going to hear your message. So I always underscore the importance of putting yourself in their shoes and playing as nicely in the sandbox as you can, but be persistent and keep showing up with the facts. And that's how David was able to stop cell towers in their area.
Okay. And I had let you know about, I also have the problem with my utility company, where their power lines is nothing's wrong with my house. I hired a building biologist.
Good.
Nothing's wrong with my house, but their power lines needs maintenance, and bringing EMF into my house that I can't live in my house. It's been over a year.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Is what my assemblywoman said. She said, they're willing to write up some legislation and maybe present it, but she said, what state has passed a law about EMF levels? Has any state passed a law on safe EMF levels? And I can't find it.
No, not yet. Not yet, but the New Hampshire Commission is really good. Nobody wants to be the first. Nobody wants to stick their necks out and go up against these industries that are the largest industries in the world today. So they're always hoping somebody else has done the dirty work, but somebody's got to be the first. And that's why that's why we see bills showing up all over the country. So at least get your legislator to get these bills introduced. And then we've got to get the public educated enough where they're going to be in front of their legislators and not stopping until we take meaningful action.
Yeah, she said, well, we're starting we want to see a state that passed the law about the EMF levels, what level it should be at. And that's like, if you're starting at that level, that means you're not open to anything.
Yep. Call her out, get other constituents informed, and get in her face.
Yeah. So I'm gonna try to do like a meeting with everybody. I know she said I'm gonna have to contact each one individual and try to set up something, and I'm gonna see like I saw you said something about a luncheon. That sounds good.
Yeah. I
wonder
would be happy to. We did a lunch and learn with Representative David Michelle for his caucus down in Connecticut, and they do lunch and learns all the time. And he said, hey, would you come educate us? And I said, sure. So we did. That was great. And he's the one who got the experts to come in and present to the Stamford, Connecticut board. And they stopped all those small cells from coming in at the curb. So yeah, if anything I can do to help educate would help you, just give me a shout.
Yeah, I'm gonna see if they have the funds to do a lunch and learn.
Yeah.
They should, right? They should have the funds for that, right?
They may. If they don't, I'll still do it, but you know, I walked away from my tech writing career to do this work, so if there is budget somewhere, I appreciate a speaker's honorarium, but if not, I've never said no.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. All right, Bev.
Oh, thank you,
help you
thank
with?
you. I can't wait to talk. So I'm in Tucson, Arizona.
Okay,
And the first thing that happened that I want to tell you about is that very recently there was a big cell tower that went up
mhm.
on a school, high school property in Tucson. And the students got together and they got that tower taken down like within a matter of
Awesome.
weeks. So
Awesome.
Tucson is really open to what you're talking about. I'm
Yeah.
just, just
Was
so
any of that
excited.
written up? Do you have a link to information on that? Because
I'll
that's
find it.
definitely worth
I'll find
sharing.
it for you.
And then I
I
would like
wrote
to
down-
include that on my school's page.
I wrote down your email. It's mma4safetech@gmail.com.
Yeah, and then
Okay.
we could get others to do stories about that. You know, I would
Great.
love to interview the kids who were
Great.
active on that. And I
Great.
know Children's Health Defense would love to bring them in for a
Great.
program too.
Yes,
So,
I would
yeah,
love to
shoot me
do
an
that.
email and we'll just keep it snowballing.
Great, perfect. So
Oh.
I also teach meditation and crystal singing bowls in elementary schools, in Title I schools. And so I have connections with like-minded people in the schools that have some impressive
Hours.
thank you. I was in a really bad car accident. I have a concussion right now.
Oh,
And
honey,
it's
I'm so
so
sorry.
frustrating because I
Yeah.
can't say what I want to say.
Yeah, I know. But be good to yourself and make sure you're doing everything you're supposed to
I
keep
am, I
safe.
am.
It's
I am.
critical.
So
Yeah.
I wanted to tell you that. And then,
Good.
so that was that. And then the other thing that was really awesome is that I got actually a phone call on my landline from our electric company saying, we're calling to let you know that we're putting smart meters on all 200 houses in your community. And just to give you a heads up, and we'll be there next week. Really long story short, I got opted out and I don't know if they did it, but I think they did. I hope they did.
Make sure you measure.
So yeah, I have to get a meter. So what they did is they came out and they changed it. And I talked to the woman that was doing it. And I did it for health reasons. And I live in a senior community and our community is owned by a big conglomerate. And they said that the conglomerate has the power to allow or not allow me to make that decision. And I got a letter from my doctor saying what my symptoms are when I'm around
Mhm,
high
mhm.
microwave activity. And they said, the only reason we're going to do this is because it's a medical issue and we're actually going to let you opt out. But we're charging you, whatever it was, $60 to take out the meter and put in a non-radio
Transmitting, yeah.
transmitting meter, which there's a big red tag on it that says that's what it is.
Okay.
And then they charge me an extra $45 a month for someone to come out and read the meter
A month?
a month. And it's annoying, but I don't want the meter. And if that's what I
Yeah.
have to pay to not have it, then I'm
Yeah,
really
and you
happy
don't
I
have to
that
leave your
option.
home, which is really critical, but that's like extortion for a public utility.
It is, it
Um,
is. But I'm really happy that because everybody else here in the whole community, they all got the 5G smart meters.
Well,
So
all the more reason to start doing some community conversation events.
that's what I'm saying. I'm so excited between my connections that I have in schools.
Yes.
And we have a big community house, a big community center
Yeah.
at our community that I can use free of charge,
Perfect.
where 100 people could be there easily.
Bring in Generation Zapped, and in my experience, the senior citizens love to go do new things, right? They've got time on their hands.
Mhm.
So I was brought into a senior center community up in New Hampshire, and I don't think there was an empty seat in the auditorium. There was sure a
Great.
lot of silence when that film ended, though. It was like.
So what's the name
everyone
of
was
it?
just-
What's
But
the name
then
of
you
it? 'Cause
guys
I
can all
missed.
pitch in and get a meter together and share it.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Mhm.
So what's the name of the movie? I missed that part.
Generation Zapped.
Generation Zapped.
Yeah.
And then how do I find it?
Oh, you can get it on your library streaming services, Canopy or Hoopla.
Oh,
Usually
okay.
have it. You can, license it for a few dollars. It was on Amazon Prime. It just got censored here, but I understand it's still available in Europe.
Oh, good.
Or you can get it on YouTube with commercials.
Oh, good. Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so you
And then
should
the
watch
other-
it yourself. Make sure you're comfortable with
Right,
it. It's only
right, right.
74 minutes.
Okay,
And I'm brought in a lot to do programs around Generation Zapped. So we'll show the screen, we'll screen it, and then I'll do a discussion and Q&A to bring everybody up to speed with what's happened since it was released in 2018. So
oh, I'm so excited. So the
Yeah.
other people the last thing I want to say, but I just want you to know, to feel the enthusiasm in
yes,
Tucson.
oh, I love it.
So the other thing is we have, like, there's a central park. Tucson's it's a pretty small, big city.
Yeah,
And so in the middle of central Tucson, we have a big park, and there's a duck pond that is part of that park that's been there for generations. And we're on the migratory route, so a lot of the birds that migrate get the benefit of that lake. And it's a pond, but it's rather big. And so anyway, the zoo is right next door. And so one of the councilmen made a proposal, and what they're doing is they were going to take out the entire duck pond and all the trees that are decades old to make room to expand the zoo and make room for giant pandas that aren't here, that the zoo is going to procure from China, and take away everything. There's this one open space that we have in Tucson that's so beautiful. It's many, many acres.
well, until the citizens get organized and speak
But
up.
that's what we did. We
That's what
got
happened.
organized and we stopped it, and they did something else, and they rearranged it, and we saved the duck pond and the trees and the grass.
Beautiful.
So it's a
Beautiful.
really active, and I'm part of that group. So I've got all those people that are just
Oh,
like,
let me at them.
so thank you. Thank you.
You
Thank
are
you
so
much for
welcome.
this.
I'm so jazzed that you're all revved up on this.
I am.
And again, just keep reaching out. If I can help with anything, you just let me
Great. I will email you.
know. Okay,
And my name is Bev Paul. So when you see
All
something
right,
on your
Bev.
email, that's me.
Great. Thank you
Okay,
so
thank
much
you. I
for who
look
you
so
are and
forward
what you
to
do.
getting the links for today.
Okay.
Thank you for what you're
Anybody
doing.
else? I'm sorry?
Thank you for what you're doing.
You're very welcome. Anybody else with any questions? All right, it's been a great day, a long afternoon, and I wish you all a tech-safe evening. And in the next day or two, we'll send out the video recording plus my slides. All right, everybody, take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye, thank you.
You're welcome, Kath.
Bye-bye.
Bye.